2, 1. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Light and Shadow Workshop Challenge thingy. There's going to be a challenge because I'm going to challenge you guys. This isn't just, a pony show or whatever we call it. What am I talking about? One trick pony? Who knows? Appreciate you guys being here. This is also going to be recorded. So if you guys saw in the last post in the community, let's see here, Light and Shadow Workshop, 1 hour. There's a link to a Google Doc. So if you want to grab that, you just click on it. Let me know. You should be able to access it because I made it for anyone to have the link. So there's a lot of stuff in this link. Let me know in the chat any questions. There's so much to cover here. As you can see, I'm just going to scroll down, and it gets very technical. I'm not going to even get through all of this. So I just wanted you guys to have this because I'm going to be talking about things, and it might kind of go over your heads, and that's fine. Light and shadow is a very tricky thing, but I'm going to just show you the basic things. So like that first image, like we could just talk about this image here the whole time, and we will. All right, so let's take a couple breaths. Let's get into that zone. We're all here to learn from each other and be with each other and have a great time doing it and become the artists we are born to be. That's a whole other discussion. Okay, so let me just make sure. What do we got here? Awesome. Rihanna's excited. Yes, yes, yes. And yeah, it's good to be excited about this stuff. And you can never learn too much about it. And at the end of the day, the best way to learn light is to go outside and look at it, or even inside. Whenever you're looking at something, ask yourself, this is the first question. And so I'm going to be using Photoshop to draw. Get your sketchbooks out. There's an app called Miro. It's a free online thing. The reason I'm using this is, well, this is great. Let's say you have a meeting and you just want to share a screen and you don't have Photoshop going. Miro is great. There are a lot of these other things you can draw on. And so the reason I'm jumping onto this right now is because a lot of people say, well, I don't have Photoshop or I don't have Procreate, so therefore I can't draw. It's like, if you have a piece of paper and a lined, notebook, you can do this. If you have something like Miro, you can do this. So I want you guys to follow along with me. We're just going to dive right into the immersive demo, and then we're going to go back and look at the technical things. Okay, so draw a circle. We're not looking for perfection here. If you have a compass, great. Just draw a circle. Okay. So this is going to be a sphere, right? So we call this a shape, right? To take a shape into form, we need light. So once we have light, then we have the form. So you are the director of your own artwork. You're the director of your own life. You're the director of everything that's going on in your life, right? A director deals with lighting on the set. So you, as the artist, you decide where is the light. I want you guys to write these down as well because it'll cement it. The light. And again, everything I'm talking about here applies to like shadow work. Right. And we'll get into a little bit of that as well. You guys know I like to cross these two worlds. Knowing where the light is in your life. Who are the people that light you up? What is the art that lights you up? What's the thing that brings you joy? That's what I mean by light. So with art, we want to decide, okay, where is that? So, okay, I'm going to be making a big mess here. Okay. So we have our sphere, and I'm just going to draw another little circle at the top right. So there is the light. This can be a sunlight. This can be a bulb. This can be a candle. There's really not that many when you really think about it. We have natural light and artificial light. So I want you guys to think of light as an eye. So I'm just going to draw like a little circle there on the other circle. So now it's just become like a little eye. So I'm not going to get too much into anatomy here. Light is an eye. So when you think of light that way, it's a really cool way to start mapping out. I'm going to write that as well. And I'm going to write I in quotations. Okay, so this light, I'm going to draw two lines that kind of come across the top and then to the bottom of that sphere. So whatever the light can see gets illuminated. And when you start thinking of lighting in that way, it's going to become very easy for you to map out your lighting on your art. So number one, where is the light? In this case, it's top right. What can the eye see, the light see? It sees the top right of the sphere. So I'm going to, just to be very simple here, I'm going to just draw a line right through that sphere. Now, when we think of sphere, we think of something that's curved, right? But sometimes you'll see like a rendering of a sphere and the line goes, the shadow goes right through. And just to show you guys, let's see here. I'll show you guys reference in a second. Okay, so one half of this is light and the other half is dark. So you can just, on the lower left one, just kind of hatch some lines through like this. So that's the second thing you want to do now, is to map out the light and the dark side of the thing that you are lighting. So we have a light side and a dark side. So in this situation, there is no guessing. We know where the light is because, well, we've decided where to put it. And then now we've mapped out the light side and the dark side of the object. So this could be a face, this could be a building, this could be an animal, doesn't matter. Okay. There are only two types of shadows. That's all you need to worry about, ever. Number one is form shadow. So we just did that. And number two is cast shadow. The shadow that the form is casting. It's throwing that shadow down on the ground, okay? So we already have the form shadow on this sphere. So the cast shadow is going to come right from the bottom of the sphere. And you can see I can literally draw a line to in between those two lines. And I can make it maybe a little bit of a thick line. And I know exactly where it ends because I mapped it out, right? So you can see you can triangulate the shadows according to your light source. This is very mathematical. There's no guessing here. So again, this is going to work when you're lighting a face, right? When you have a cast shadow of a nose on a face, you map the shadow out. You don't guess where it goes, right? You map it out according to the light. So very technical, mathematical, but knowing this allows us to be free in our creations. But we need to follow some kind of rules for it to be somewhat believable, right? Okay, I'm going to look at this this document. The great Leonardo da Vinci said, "Shadow is the means by which bodies display their form." Right? So again, we can start being very poetic about our light and shadow, right? See, it's like we learn the rules, all these technical geek things, which I think are super fun, and then we can then play with them poetically, artistically, and become magicians of our own artwork. Okay, we just kind of went over this. Every shadow has a cause. Every light has a source and direction, right? So when we look at our sphere, so the whole point of that is we don't make up shadows. If you do, you're going to get into the trouble of wondering why the artwork is not working. So we can mathematically map out and triangulate the shadows. And once you know this, you can't unknow it. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So light reveals the object, shadow reveals its form. And sometimes shadow reveals more light than light ever could. And we'll get into that in a second. It's easy to think that shadows are just always dark and there's no light. That's not true. There is light in shadows, and we'll get into that. All right, but you guys are going to learn. By the end of this workshop, members should be able to look at any subject and answer, where is the light coming from, right? So again, when you then go outside or look in your room right now and look at an object, and well, you ask yourself, where is the light? Most of the time, I think we're all in scenarios here where we're top lit. It's very rare when there's lights at the bottom, but there could be light at the bottom. When you have light at the bottom, it's going to create more of a horror effect or a creepy effect. And if that's what you want, great. Is the light source hard or soft, right? Super important. That's going to dictate the shadows and the hardness of the shadows. Which planes belong to the light family? Okay, we're going to talk about that now. Planes, what the hell is that? We're drawing airplanes here? No, we're drawing planes. Okay, I want you guys to draw a cube. So we're just going to draw a cube. And if yours looks as awesome as mine, you're in good shape. I'm kidding. This looks like a fifth grader drew it, but it's all good. All right. There is a cube. These are 3 planes, right? 1, 2, 3. That's what planes are. Planes are flat surfaces on an object. Now, how can you have planes on a sphere? Well, you can, but it's so smooth that the planes are super small, creating a gradient effect. If you ever look at a 3D model of a sphere that's low resolution, you see all the planes. Those are the planes. So, which planes belong to the light family? Yes, light has family. So again, if we're going to light this cube, what do we got to do? We're the directors. We put in the light. Let's put in the light at the top left. Now again, if this light is the sun, this light is 80, 90 million miles back, right? If it's a bulb in a room that's right to the left, it is right there, right? It's very important to understand where the light is in space. But just for now, let's just say that this light is literally right over here. It's kind of like a spotlight. Let's say it's like a lamp. If you want, you can draw a lamp, like that classic Pixar lamp. And that lamp is an eye. Whatever that eye sees gets illuminated. So you can see if this lamp is like over here, it is seeing, we can map it out. Again, draw a line from the eye of the light down to the first corner of the cube. And then that second line is going to go from the top, hit the top of that cube, and then just go all the way. It's a straight line. So the planes of the light family. So which plane would you say is the light seen most of? It's the top one, right? And then followed by number 2 on this side. Again, it depends on where the light is. The light can like see, around to a certain degree. But these are flat planes. And then on this side, number 3, the light is not seeing any of that. So again, just to reiterate, which planes belong to the light family. So when you're doing like hard surface things or angular things, you can group them into like, okay, what is the light seeing and where's the light not seeing it? So number 3 on the right, I'm going to hatch in. And so when I say hatch, I'm just saying lines, right? It's a great way to shade in something very quickly, just to get the vibe of the shading. So number 3 is going to be the darkest plane because, again, it doesn't belong to the light family. It belongs to the shadow family. It's like Adam's family, but the shadow family. I think that needs to be someone needs to make that book. Okay, number 2, I'm going to just hatch just a bit less. The lines aren't as close together, right? So it's making it appear that is more lit than number 3. But just to really hit it home, I'm going to make number 3 even darker. So I've seen people do amazing shading with just hatch work. It doesn't need to be this smooth, perfect gradient. I think it actually has more character. It's more interesting when it's hatched like this. And then number 1, we can just leave as is because it's getting the most light. So we have 3 values on a cube at any given point. If you don't have 3 distinct values, when I say value, I just mean light or dark. If you don't have 3 distinct values, it's going to be flat. It's just going to be it's not going to have any form. And so now looking at, okay, remember there's form shadows and cast shadows. We've just done the form shadow. And if this cube is on, you need to know, okay, where is your object? If this cube is on a table, again, I can extend out this shadow. Let's say the table ends right here. So that's where the shadow ends, on the table there, right? If you were to zoom out, you would be able to maybe map some of that shadow onto the floor or something else. That's where it gets a bit tricky, but don't worry about that. And now I can still hatch that shadow now. If you want things to appear that they are grounded or they live in a realistic space, we need those 2 shadows, form shadows, cast shadows. And there's a fall off that happens, meaning, okay, now we're going to get into more of the intricacies here. There's something that happens right at the base of the shadow, and that's why I'm darkening this a bit more. You have your object, and then right where it touches another object, in this case the table, it's way darker here for now. Then when it falls off towards the right, you can see I'm just really trying to indicate. And remember, hatching can be cross hatching. You can perpendicular lines over what you're drawing. Because once you get these principles right, you can get away with super rough stuff like this, and it's going to look cool. It's going to look believable. So we'll get into the intricacies of like, okay, what what's happening here, how many types of different shadows are there. But you can see I'm getting away with this here in a very messy way. And sometimes it helps to zoom out. What's cool about this Miro app or other apps that have this infinite scroll is that you can really zoom out and get an interesting overview of what you're drawing. And I'm using a tablet, so that helps. By the way, the tablet I use is the Wacom. You can get a very inexpensive used one for, God, they probably make them for less than $50. And they work great. I've had this one for like 5 years. I've always used this brand, so Wacom. All right. And then there's, okay, which planes belong to the shadow family? So we kind of just did that inadvertently. Where does the cast shadow travel? So that was the other thing that we were doing here. In this case, it traveled to the edge of the table. And the table is its own form, and it is obeying the same laws of the lighting, right, in the scene, right? Where you put your physics, science hat on and mapping these things out. Okay, let's do a cone now. So those three shapes, so sphere, cube. Actually, let's do cylinder and then we'll do cone. So those four shapes, if you can really understand how to light and render these things according to the principles of lighting, then you can render anything. It doesn't matter, because everything that you see now in the world, right, is made up of these four basic shapes. Here, I'll just draw the cone here. And combinations of these shapes with one another, right? So I look at this coffee cup. It is a cone, but it's tapered, right? So these are the variations you get. The pen is a cone. The pencil is a cone with a cylinder on it. You look at a car. Well, what is the most basic shape of a car? It's a cube, right? With cylinders on the side for wheels, right? So you look at everything in your environment, including yourself. Like, how would you draw a figure in this way? It's totally possible. Okay. Here, I'm going to just do it clean over here. So it's good to give yourselves these little experiments and these little studies to do. And they're just kind of fun to do because you don't really have to think too much once you understand these basic things again. Okay, so we have a cylinder. Could be a cup, can of soda. Hopefully it doesn't have artificial sweeteners in it. To each their own. All right. So again, we decide where is the light. So again, our lights are usually coming from the top. We're going to get into multiple light sources in a second, but I just want to give you guys the most basic ways to understand these concepts. And then you can tweak them and fudge them all the hell you want. Okay. So we have the light source as the eye, and then I'm going to draw a line from the eye down to the edge of the cone. And then another line from the top of, the cylinder all the way here. So we can call this mapping shadows. We're just literally mapping out what these shadows are going to, where they're going to go, where they're going to travel to. So already, when you draw a cone or a cylinder like this, you're implying that you're looking down on it because you could see the top plane. And so, yes, even a circle can be a plane in this sense. And then, okay, well, where is that cylinder, right? It's very easy to add. Okay, let's add a plane, a little table underneath the cylinder. And that's going to have some thickness too. So this could be like a little drawer. That's always such a weird word. Drawer. By the way, when people say, "Are you a drawer?" Because I draw, because we draw, man, that's the worst. I hate that. Because, okay, we have painter, we have sculptor, we have designer, and then we got drawer. It just reminds me of like, we used to call these things, our underwear we would call drawers when we were kids. Put your drawers in the drawer, son. Anyway, digress. Okay. So again, form shadows, cast shadows, right? We need to then map out a cast shadow of this cylinder. So again, that's going to come from the bottom of the cylinder across that draw top, tabletop, and then the other side of the cylinder, like right there. So again, not a lot of guesswork. We determine where the light is, what the eye of light sees, and then we map out the shadow on whatever surface or object that thing is on. And so, well, with the cylinder, I want to have a gradient that goes across from the left to right. So I'm going to start at the right side and just kind of do this hatch line work. And then as I get closer to the other side, I make the hatch lines wider. So you can just make the right side pretty dark if you want. And you're just doing a bunch of hatch lines, and then again, they're getting wider and wider until there's no hatch lines. So something like that. And if you do this a few times, then your objects are going to really feel three-dimensional. Christopher, good morning. All right. So hopefully this made as much sense as possible. So again, when we see these sketches here, you can kind of get a sense of, how all this works. I made these sketches very playful and very, rudimentary and almost childlike on purpose, because this is a complicated subject, but I think a lot of art is over complicated, but hopefully it is not complicated. So again, for those of you just joining, I'm just going to put the link to anyone else hearing a weird clicking or scratching sound. I don't know. Hopefully it's not me. So, okay. What I wanted to do now was, I'm just going to go over some of artwork that you guys posted, just to might not relate totally to this, but again, lighting is huge. I'm going to show you guys a couple of other ways to think about lighting. All right. First up is Rhiannon's. Okay, Rhiannon's book cover, which is really cool. And I'm going to open these up in Photoshop. And then we were going to get into like, what is light? What is this thing? Let's just go easy right now. Oh my God, is that me again? That's crazy. Okay. So Rhiannon, you did these like other studies based off of your original sketch. And so we were talking about before, like, how much are you going to add some digital pieces? Because you've obviously added some digital elements and cleaned up. And to be totally honest, I just love your original sketch. Like, and it's good to do these other things because most of your book, besides the digital explorations, are going to have this look to it, this vibe. Like, this is clearly hand drawn, and that's great. And then here we see, some digital artifacting, which again, it's great. But imagine this on a bookshelf, and this one doesn't have the title. And so, what I wanted you to start thinking about, if you haven't already, is the font. So we have, okay, Inktober to Transformation, an artist's accidental journey, which is cool. That's like intriguing, right? Like, the book cover is going to sell the book. And so I already feel that you put a font onto this, and maybe you extract the key and then redo the border as digital, right? But I'm not sure how much you're playing with fonts. Okay, we're not going to use that one, but I see a kind of a whimsical kind of, let's see here. Again, Canva is free, and you just use their dope fonts. Seriously. I have some here that, again, I'm looking for one. It could even be handwritten. And then you might think, why don't I can handwrite the thing. Maybe not, though. Because it needs to be crazy legible, right? From a distance. So maybe not handwritten, but it could be handwritten. So you can see how I can just go through all of these fonts. You can see that it's like cycling through. And if I use my arrow keys, okay, you start to, oh yeah, that's kind of cool because it has like an inky vibe to it. It almost looks like a stamp. Don't worry about the names of these things. You can find them if you type in grunge fonts. But what I wanted to get at here is, because this is from a shadow work challenge. Like, this is literally as it pertains to this workshop. And what I was imagining earlier, just in my imagination, was like a cast shadow coming onto the artwork like this. It's as if something else is casting a shadow onto the artwork. But you do the shadow, like you do this in Photoshop or even in Procreate, right? And it kind of creates that moodiness. See, versus this, I think there's a lot of light here. And yes, you want the font to stick out. So, I mean, who's to say the font can't be white, right? So this is where you're going to be spending a lot of time creating this cover. And you might think, okay, well, white is too much. So you can go gray with a drop shadow, right? But there's something about like the simplicity of your key here on the left versus here. I think there's too much contrast going on everywhere. When you have too much contrast, again, this is a lighting thing. The eye doesn't know where to rest. It doesn't know where to stop, right? Versus something like this. And if you could take it a bit further, and this is a color dodge layer on top of it, of like even enhancing the light, even just ever so slightly. Remember, we are literally telling the viewer where to look first and foremost in our art. So because, okay, I see the top of this key, right? And it has the hearts in it, and it's kind of like bleeding or dripping. There's something there that's inviting. I add more contrast to that area. You're telling the viewer, I want you to look here first and then travel around the scene, and so that is my recommendation for that. Take a screenshot of this. I'll do it here too, but just in case, take a screenshot of that. Play around with it. Again, imagine it on a bookshelf and people are in a bookstore and it's that far away. And we're like, whoa, interesting. I can read that from here. Inktober. Like, what is that? And so again, maybe your title doesn't need to be this long. Stories in our work and your name, great. Like that needs to be on there. And these things can be, again, I really want you to play around with this thing and exhaust what I call exhaust your options. Like your title can be at the top and then your credit at the bottom, right? Play around with that. I just did these as placeholders. It's got to be, especially in this world of noise, and like, it's got to be so iconic and really stand out. Now, I know you mentioned you might be doing some digital explorations and color stuff, but I think the power of your series is the black and white. I think that's the power of it. And maybe you can do color prints separately, and then you can have a QR code that links from your book and say, hey, if you want to see these in color, check out this QR code. It takes them to your website. Your website has the prints for the color stuff, right? Again, there's so many different ways you can go about this. So, all right, hopefully that made sense. It sparked some ideas. Cool. Yeah. Keep exploring on this. I know book covers they can be tricky. I mean, all good art is tricky. Okay. All right, next up, we've got Tammy's piece, which is a beautiful piece. Man, just like, look at that. That's amazing. That's some great watercolor. Tammy, if you're here, this is awesome. I think I saw you here. But regardless, this is great. And so I'm going to show you guys a trick. If you guys aren't doing this with your work, I really highly recommend you do this with your work. And it will take something like Photoshop. Actually, here, check this out. Photo P. I just heard about this the other day. Photo, let's see if it's a real thing. It's real. Amazing. Okay, you guys have to take note of this. Photo P, like peas and pea in a pod. I'm going to put it in the link in the chat if it wants to go. This is an free online Photoshop interface. So actually, I'll just do this right now, Tammy, with your piece. So I have, I'm going to open from computer. I'm going to open the image. And okay. There we go. Look at that. Photoshop. Boom. Now, what I wanted to show you guys was we can, when we change our images to black and white, we can really see what things we might have been overlooking, because color can be very distracting. There's a great saying in the art world I heard 20 years ago, and it's, value does all the work and color takes all the credit. And so we'll kind of see that in play here. So what I want to do is put an adjustment layer And if you are looking at what I'm doing here in the layers section, you see a little, looks like a little yin yang symbol. It's like half light, half dark thing. And what I want to do is click on hue saturation. And it's going to bring up a slider here. And then I'm going to bring the saturation slider all the way to 0. If it'll let me. Boom. Okay. So what this did was put an adjustment layer, which again is not hurting the artwork, but you know, okay, I just got to figure out how to get this thing back. There we go. So you can see it's a layer on top of the art. You can see now the flowers in Tammy's artwork. If you squint, now look at this piece. The one on the left is kind of asking for more attention. Why is that? Because it's brighter and it doesn't have the most contrast. The most contrast is on the flower on the right. So on a subjective level, these two flowers are competing for our attention, right? That's what happens in art. The other thing is, now Tammy, I know you mentioned having, or was it I that mentioned, or someone mentioned like, just throw in a little fairy in there. And then you mentioned like your fairy book, which is great. What I really recommend is adding that third element in this scene. And that can be a digital thing. You don't have to add it into your final piece. But again, the power of 3, and this is getting more into design. See, this all kind of comes into play, and then we alchemize this into our artwork. Whenever you have two things in a scene that are the same size, they are competing with one another. And therefore, they're competing for the attention of the viewer. Right now, these two flowers are roughly the same size. And so we need that third element. So if I grab a new layer and just there, what I imagined when I first saw this was like, oh, a little fairy that's like hovering between the two. And she's got her wings. And okay, so how we move, I'm sorry, I'm giving you guys a Photoshop lesson, which is again, Photo P, which is free, which is great. This little arrow here at the top left here, it's going to allow us to move things around. There, she's flying, the fairy's flying. So now I've added a trifecta, a third element. The number 3 is always so pleasing in composition and design, right? Because now there's no competition per se. And our eye is always going to go first to the figure. But let's say you didn't want to add a fairy. You know, something along the lines of, like I see a lot of open space here. And that's kind of, you know, it's wanting me to put stuff in there. You have these really great trees in the back. You know, there could be more trees before you put in something a bit more substantial, right? And even that is kind of now relieving my desire to want to see something. I think, again, when we have too much open space in a painting, the human mind wants to fill it in. And again, we don't always have to. There's an art of balance here. But to have some maybe subtle trees back there. Oops, I drew that on the layer. It's all good. And so this is the fun of being able to do digital explorations. So you can have your fairy here. I'm trying to transform this, which means if you go to edit, transform, and then scale. No. Edit, transform, scale. I just know all the key commands of this. There we go. See, you can have one version where the fairy is like this small, and it's still becoming the trifecta, right? But let's say, okay, I don't want fairies in there. I think adding those trees in the background could be good. And then potentially adding, again, some kind of third and potentially fourth and maybe fifth element. See if that's just a bit more. Making this is going to be number one. This one's going to be number two because of where they're at on the value scale. Meaning, if you grabbed a layer like color dodge, which is a kind of a brightening scale, see how I can lighten that flower on the left, making it more important, as it were. Because we always need these levels of importance in a piece, in design, right? So you can see what that's doing. It's just adding. So that would mean, well, what would you have to do to this piece here? It's very hard to lighten watercolors. I get it. So that would mean darkening the other things. But again, you know, you're done with this piece. It seems like it's a finished piece, but you can do another one. That's what's great about making art. We just make more art, right? So, you know, even if I zoom out, you can see that flower on the left is the main focal point. The flower on the right is secondary focal point. Then we can have tertiary focal points. You can have a bunch of stuff going on. And if you do decide to add that fairy, well, then that could be cool. All right. Great work, Danny. All right. Now we're going to look at, let's see, Christopher. Oh, wait. Linda posted this first, and then we'll look at Christopher's. Amazing work, Linda. I assume this is also watercolor. So again, when you look at a piece like this, it's like, where is the focal point? And but see, there's a balance that's happening here, and it's already grayscale, so we're not being confused by color per se. Let's see what it looks like flipped. So this is another great trick. You can do this in Photo P, of course, in Photoshop, Procreate. Flipping the image. So it looks, when your image looks good flipped both ways, then the image is working, like compositionally. When you flip an image and it's way off, then that means it's way off in the way that you originally created it. You just got so used to looking at it a certain way. You know, zooming out. If I were to look at this image and someone asked me, what is it? I would be like, oh, it's okay, it's waves, it's an ocean. I see a horizon, I see the ground, I see a sky, right? And maybe that's all it needs to be, right? Oh, you got birds in there too. Cool. Love those birds. I just want to see what would happen if we, again, the contrast is working really well. If I enhanced some of the contrast using, see, doing that at the bottom, is that going to mess it up, right? And again, how do you apply this back to the watercolor if you're doing true watercolor? The white is your paper. I mean, the way I would do it is I would use white ink to enhance things on a watercolor, but then it's not a true watercolor. But something like that, even lightening up this entire bottom, you can see even from this distance, it just adds that first focal point. Now, again, we don't want our images to compete. We can't have the sky as bright as the bottom. We need one area. And that's kind of why I picked this bottom right part of the wave. And so that's one option, is that. which I think works. And again, another option is, well, how much darker can we make the ocean? So now I'm using the Dodge brush to do this. So you can see here, like darkening the ocean. Kind of, it also works. So it's like, okay, the ocean brighter, sky brighter, right? And so, these are things that we can do to our traditional pieces in the digital world that will then help prepare us to do more traditional pieces. But it's more of like you have to plan this stuff out, especially with watercolor. Oh, you changed the black and white. You have the color version. Interesting. Yeah, it'd be cool to see the color version. So again, it's a preference thing. But looking at, if I were to pick, I'd be like, okay, I want that ocean to be brighter. But that's just me. But great work, Linda. Always love seeing good traditional work. All right, Christopher. This guy's dope. This guy, I want to party with this guy. So again, whenever I bring in my traditional work into Photoshop or Procreate, I'll flip it. And so, Christopher, my question to you is, how much more of this scene do we have, right? Is this literally the edge of the paper, or is there more? Because compositionally, I'm always thinking of like the print and framing the artwork. It's like we make the artwork and then we decide whether we want to share it. And sharing means presentation, it means selling, it means all that stuff. And if it's just for you and you're like, I don't give a shit about any of that, I just want to do the artwork, cool. But that's my first kind of inclination when I see a piece, is like,
get it as a weird portrait kind of.
Okay. So, but is there more? Do you have more? So let's see. What I'm getting at is, if there is, I'm just going to crop outwards. See, with the background color, the same color as your paper, right? And see, already that gives it a sense of space. And, if you're looking to sell the piece or make prints, these are things that you can then modify after the fact. You can see, like what I did here, just give it a bit more space. And, I know a lot of us, we do sign our artwork. I'm just going to do a fake signature for you, Christopher. Having a bit of space outside and the signature on it, it completes the piece like maybe 20% more, right? Because I think as is a great sketch. Like, it's done. You don't need to do anything more to it. Like, I would just leave it as is, right? But thinking about the presentation, the print, is just something that I'd be just super curious to see. Even from this distance, it's a really cool sketch. You can tell what it is. It's a bird with a dope hat on. And cool monochromatic element, which is really nice. He is very distinguished. Yeah, I know. He's like, if Johnny Depp were a bird. Some people don't like Johnny Depp. I think he's interesting. Cool. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great as is. Just think about, okay, if you did want to present it and sell it, this would be a way to go about this. Cool. Great stuff, guys. And again, well, what does that have to do with? Well, a lot of that was, lighting, right? How we light our things. Okay, let's get back into lighting. Okay, this is all in that PDF. I'm not going to go over this, but again, what is light? We only see this little sliver. There's so much shit out there that we'll never see on this side of, eternity. But I'm looking forward to experiencing it in the next life. Like all of this cosmic rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet, like all this stuff, radio waves. This all in the light spectrum, right? And we only see this little sliver in here. It's super tiny. So light is a form of energy. Again, that phrase, value does all the work, color takes all the credit. So just really get in the habit of making your values work really well. Again, value is lights and darks and everything in between, the gray scale. Let's see, light emits, reflects, and bounces, right? It's like, this is what light can do, right? The sun emits light, fire emits light, bulb emits light, moon reflects sunlight, a white wall reflects light, a red floor can bounce reddish light into the shadow side of a figure, right? So we have different light sources. Some emit, some reflect, some bounce. Tammy's asking, are there any rules around value, like half light, half shadow, or automa? Exactly. And so again, they would be maybe not so much rules, but things that we put into the thing. So I'll get into that right now. But again, what is the source of light in your painting? Something to think about. Is it natural? Is it artificial? Is it a hybrid? Right? So this here is a really cool diagram of sources of light. So sunlight, moonlight, artificial light. Okay, so now we're going to get into this, which we've already talked about. Okay, we have a light side and we have a dark side, right? And then within the light sides, we have more stuff. And in the dark sides, we actually have even more stuff. So I didn't want to overcomplicate this in the beginning. Again, this is all in that PDF or the link that I sent you guys. So again, understanding light and shadow. And we're going to get into this now. So we kind of sketched this in the beginning. We drew a sphere with a line right through it, light side, dark side. So on your light side, you have your main light. And people call these things different things sometimes, but they're referring to the same thing. Your highlight is going to be the brightest part of the object. Now, this is going to be dependent on material, right? Is it matte like a basketball? Or is it like a pool ball with a lacquer on it? That's going to have a reflection in it, right? Is it wet skin versus dry skin? Dry skin doesn't have highlights on it. Wet skin does. So you need to define what is the base material. So then you have the halftone. So you have light and the highlight living together. Then it goes into halftone, right? And then we come to this thing called the terminator. I always think of good old Arnold. It is where the light transitions into dark. Terminator. Think Arnold Schwarzenegger or not. I don't know. And, right near the terminator is the core shadow, which is the darkest part of the shadow. And I'll demo this in a second. And then now you have everything in the shadow. You have your form shadow. You have your bounce light or reflected light, same thing. And then you have your cast shadow. And then right where the object hits the surface is the occlusion shadow. It's the darkest part of the shadow. I know this sounds like a lot of stuff, but if you want your images to really pop in this kind of way, you're going to want to add in these elements. So I'm going to do this in Photoshop because it's a bit easier to do. You want to grab a new piece of paper. Okay. Let's draw our sphere. And we're just going to do it quickly like we did before. Okay, we have our light source. Let's make it top left. All right. So let's just do the same things. This is, after a while, you're going to be like, oh, I know exactly how to do this. I know how to map out the shadows because I know where the light is, right? I know I'm going to give my object something to be on, unless, say, you're rendering a planet. There's nothing for the planet to be on, right? Same rules still apply, though. But I think it's way more interesting to have other objects in a scene. I mean, planets are cool, but I think a ball on a table rendered really well is way cooler. But that's just me. Okay, so again, we draw the line from the bottom of the sphere. You know, we're kind of imagining the other side of the sphere as well. If you imagine a ball on a table, imagine the contact point of the ball to the table. It's really not a massive surface. So that's why I'm seeing the shadow like so. And we can just, again, hatch in the shadow. And let's just talk about that cast shadow for a second. That's the occlusion shadow happening right where the sphere is in contact with the table. I can almost make that just all black in there. And then it kind of gradates. Gradates? I think those are two separate words. There's a gradation that happens in the shadow. So now, because of this light, let's say this light is the sun. So it's like, it's not just top right of the scene, it's 90 million miles that way. So again, what is the sun seeing? It's seeing the left side of the sphere, but really just that part. So this is me dividing now the light side and the shadow side. And so I can, again, just hatch in. And I can even hatch in straight lines because I'm just creating the illusion that, yes, this is a sphere, but what's making it a sphere is this curved line here. So in the beginning of an art piece, when you're mapping your shadows out like this, it doesn't have to be these perfect renderings. Like, it can be super loose. So remember this line here where it changes from light into shadow. That's the terminator. So you can write it out. It's where the light terminates, right? It's an interesting word for that. And kind of like shortly after the terminator is the core shadow. Core shadow is the darkest part of the shadow. I'm literally drawing kind of a thick line here, a thick shape. And this takes a bit of practice to get your gradations to happen. If you're thinking, oh, it's just not working, it still looks flat, again, really get in there and, in this case, darken the entire right side of the sphere. Now, if you're using pen, it's going to be hard to then bring back the light. I'm going to show you guys that right now. See, when I zoom out, it's kind of sort of not working because I just really haven't darkened this whole right side. So So just really get in there, and if you're using pencil, you're gonna be able to erase out, which is, we want to be able to do that next. So again, you can see I zoom out a lot just to be able to get a sense of, is this working or not? You want to do that with your artwork. If you're drawing on paper, you stand up and you put it on the other side of the room, right? You walk away from it. With digital, I can just, zoom out. Also, depending on what paper you're using as your base, that's going to be your mid-tone. So what does that mean for what I'm doing here? Well, let's say you had white color pencils on tone paper. You can then add in that. So we're not talking too much about materials here other than, well, if you start with white paper, that is going to be your lightest light, right? If you start with mid-tone, then you can add in the lights. If I continued with that process, see, I add a highlight. So again, don't worry if yours is not looking the way you want it. Just remember what you want to have in the light and what in the shadows. So we want to highlight where it's needed. Remember, not everything's going to have like a super highlight. We want our light, obviously. The light transitions into a mid-tone. So, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's the middle tone. So these three things we want on the light side. And not everything is going to have the highlights. You're always going to have light and then the mid-tone on the light side, always. You always want that gradation, right? In this case, it is this light. So imagine I have now, this is pencil, and I have my finger, and then I can just smudge it with my finger into the mid-tone, right? That's the idea. A sphere is going to have gradations. It's not going to be any hard line. That's going to be for a cube. So you see all this stuff. So I'm just like making a mess here with the smudge. And this is what takes a bit of practice. So now it's starting to sort of work. So we have our terminator, again, which is where the light transitions from light into shadow. And we have our core shadow, which is the darkest part of our shadow. And then we have just the overall shadow side. Some would call it like the dark tones or whatever's in the shade, right? So it's like, again, light side, dark side, light side, dark side. And then what happens on pretty much everything is reflected light. And so that is what I'm kind of bringing in here in the bottom right. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit because this is a very subtle thing, but if you're able to add this into your artwork, it has a really cool effect. Now I made mine too light there. It's still too light. So again, this is the game of like adding darks, taking away darks, adding lights, taking away lights. It's a whole balancing act, this whole thing. And It's simple, but it's not easy. Okay, now it's this smudge brush isn't doing what I wanted it to. It almost looks like a palantir from Lord of the Rings with see, it's like, imagine a crystal ball, the lighting that, really difficult. A palantir, super difficult. It's like you have almost like glass, and then you have crystal inside, and then you have elements going. This can go very complicated, very fast. Okay, so again, I just want to bring in a sense of light in the shadow. And so, if anything, just write this down. This is reflected light. What does that mean? It's also called bounce light. Where is it bouncing from? Think about where this ball is, right? Remember, light comes down. It's also seeing the top of this table, as it were, right? All this light on the table. That is the bounce light. It is a combination of the table plus, well, what is the table made of? See, we always want to ask ourselves the questions. What is the material made of? Where is the light? Right? We always want these questions running around in our head. If this is a very bright table, so we have sunlight coming down, right? So again, light source, sunlight coming down. If this is imagine it's like a white marble table, it's going to be another light source. So that is reflected in bounce light. The sunlight comes down, hits the table, bounces back up into the sphere. Light hits the table, bounces back up into the sphere. And so we get reflected light. And the intensity of that light is going to be, again, determined on what is the material of our object. So if it's a matte material, dry skin, rubber, just think about the things that you're putting into your artwork, or that you want to put into your artwork, versus like glass or crystal, right? Super reflective. And then you're getting into actual reflections, which we're not going to get into that today. Reflected light is not reflections. Reflections are tricky because essentially you are creating a mirror of your object. So if your object is chrome is it's like a mirror in a sphere form. It means you have to reflect the entire environment into that, which is wild. That's pretty difficult to do. So that's kind of the gist of it all. And I know it was a lot. So, we always just kind of go back to, the basics of what we're doing. So I'm just going to do an eye real quickly. And then, if there's any questions, drop them in. I think we've done a lot today. Okay, so again, repetition and intensity is how I like to do things, because then you commit things to memory, and you commit them to not only mental memory, muscle memory, like drawing a circle, right? No one can draw a perfect circle. It's bullshit. If you have a compass, yeah, or a template. Okay, so let's say this is an eyeball. So we have a circle, and then we have another circle, and then we have another circle, but don't complete the circle. Make it like a C. So circle, circle, C. And then in that C, I want you to draw another circle. So this will be as much, the most we'll do on reflections. It's literally that fourth circle is a reflection. Will I ever put together light and shadow using? Well, yeah, and I think again, these things can be found. You can just kind of find them. Like, how do I render a matte thing versus we already did a very reflective thing. For instance, all the images that I've been putting in here, like there's plenty of stuff online. And this is from James Gurney's book, not to get too ahead of myself. Like, if there's a book you want that is going to really get to the heart of everything I'm talking about, it is Color and Light. This is what it looks like. James Gurney, Color and Light. Again, this is all in the document. You can just scroll through and get it. And he really gets into it all, especially color. I mean, of course, he touches on what we're touching here. The problem I see with a lot of beginner artists is that they want to jump right into color. And if you do not understand light, your color is not going to work. Not going to work. So we want to understand light first. So let's say, okay, we're drawing an eyeball and it's on a table. Because why not? I mean, we've all seen eyeballs on a table. The thing with light sources is that most of the time they are not in the scene. So in this case of, remember that fourth circle that we drew here? Well, that is the highlight on a very, assuming the eyeball is still wet, right? The eyeball is very reflective. So we definitely have a highlight. And all of those other rules are still going to apply, right? So you just need to, in your work, just remind yourself, it can be as simple as an arrow. Where is the light and what direction is it coming from? So in this scene, I have this light source that is hitting the top right of the pupil area. And so I can safely assume that the light is top right and it is outside of the scene. Remember, most of our light sources will not be in the scene. The sources won't be in the scene. And you don't always want them in the scene. It's way better to imply that you understand lighting and you know where your light source is and it's affecting your object. So remember, we have the same rules applying. We have a sphere, which is an eyeball. And now I want to kind of map out the light side and the dark side. So that's why I just drew this big curve that goes through it like so. And then I'm just going to hatch in very loosely the dark side. You'll do this every time. Everything you ever render, everything you ever want to add lighting to. You draw the thing, and then you place your light, just like a photographer or director would. Then you figure out, okay, where's the light side, where's the dark side? And you just do those two groups first and foremost, just like here. Then it's like, okay, the shadow, remember? Only two types of shadows, but we always have to be very mindful and be very consistent in our work. Form shadow, which is what's happening here, and then cast shadow. So if this eyeball were on a table, we map out the shadow, and then we fill in the shadow. And then we're going to add in those elements as we go. Terminator, core, the overall shadow side was the first thing that we did. Reflected light. And whatever the details, which is a whole other thing, of the object itself. So in the case of an eye, we have our pupil, which is going to be that main center circle. And remember, the pupil is a hole. And then I'm just going to do very quick detail. I'm going to draw a bunch of squiggly lines and a bunch of like ovals, just kind of really random. Squiggly lines, ovals inside of the iris. This is musculature detail because it's a literal muscle that opens and closes. And you can see how loose this is, and you zoom out and you see how effective that is. So again, the same rules are going to apply. I'm going to have reflected light at the bottom. I might even have a couple highlights. I might have a highlight up there. Because to really understand an eyeball, you have to understand what it looks like from the side. Now, we're not going to get into that. That's a whole other anatomy thing. So again, the best way to do this is to do it in reality. I'm not saying cut out someone's eyeball unless you don't tell us that. Grab a ball, take it outside, place it under, and just ask yourself the questions. Okay, you can see where the light is, if it's the sun or if it's overcast. Where's your cast shadow? How is the light affecting the object? And you literally draw it. The best way to learn how to draw is to draw from life, figures and objects. But again, even if you just knew how to do this, what you're seeing here, like it's enough and it works. And it's like, okay, how much time are you going to put into really rendering the thing out? How smooth do you want it? How realistic do you want it? Because if you're doing comics and stuff, then maybe this is all you need. Like this level of finish right here. This is enough to tell a story. Like this is enough to create artwork out of this and create a style and then be able to sell that artwork, which is a whole other thing, right? But what I'm saying is your artwork doesn't have to be super polished, finished, hyper realism. And honestly, it's better that it isn't, because that's what photography is for. If you want super hyper realism, why don't you just take the photo, right? It's where you craft your line work and your style, your composition, your sense of color, how you understand anatomy. That's going to play into your own unique art style. So I think that wraps it up, guys. I think I know there was a lot more here, and I know I wanted to talk more about like the shadow work, but okay, we'll do that right here, and then I put in some shadow work prompts here. Again, I think it's so important to really get into what's blocking us from creating the art we want to create. See, it all comes back to art and our creations, but we have things in the way, right? And that's where shadow work can come in. Like for instance, when you observe a shadow in your drawing, ask yourself, what part of my own psyche is being concealed in this darkness, right? So I just wanted to come up with I asked GPT to just pretend you're Carl Jung and give me 5 awesome, powerful shadow work prompts. Where in your life do you refuse to allow light to reach? Right? That's really interesting. A lot of us, we don't want to let the light in because it reveals. You shine the light on something and you see everything. And a lot of us, we don't want that, right? Or sometimes we want more light in. And so the intensity and the power of the light we let in will then create the shadow, the opposite equal shadow of that, therefore concealing what's in our shadows even more so the more we bring in people and things of light and joy in our lives makes our shadows darker, right? That's something to kind of think about. It's really interesting to play with these. The shadow is not your enemy, but your unlived life. Carl Jung is always, hitting that home. It's your unlived life in the shadow. It's not all bad. It's just things that you're not aware of, things that you kind of put the uncomfortable or awkward or bad things into the shadows, but sometimes they're what I call the treasures in the shadow. It's like you have an old toy or an old photo album that is in the basement, and you go looking for something one day and you find like, oh my God, there's this fucking thing, and like, it brought me so much joy. Like, there are treasures in the shadow, right? So it's not all bad. Shadow work is great. It can be uncomfortable, but it's important, and it's going to then reflect into our art. Whatever we find in our shadows and alchemize into our lives, it will then transmute into our art, making our art even more meaningful and way more better. Okay. Now, yes, I'm challenging you guys. I want you guys to just anytime this week, just sketch and render spheres, cubes, and cones, and then post them, just like in this diagram here. If you think that's a waste of time, well, then you haven't heard anything I said, because the better we get at these little tiny things, again, it's going to then translate into our artwork, into our faces, and into our animals and buildings and rivers and forests and things, right? But we need to compartmentalize these techniques into like bite-sized things. And so that is my challenge to you guys, is just sketch and render spheres, cubes, and cones, just like we did on this call today, and just post them and ask for feedback, or just say, no, here's what I did. I don't need any feedback because I get it, right? So go through this document. Thank you guys for being here. And in closing, the obvious light gives us visibility, right? The more light we put on something makes it more visible. The things in our artwork that we want more attention on, we need to shine more light on it. But the problem is, if we don't understand these principles, it's not going to work, right? So understand the principles. Shadow gives us dimension. Without shadow, forms become flat. Without light, forms disappear. Every shadow has a cause. Every light has a source and direction. So super important. Stop guessing at your shading. Hopefully you've learned enough from this to really understand, okay, I don't need to guess anymore. I just need to know where my light is, how strong the light is, what is the material of my object, and what is my object, what is the environment of my object, right? And then you can really start to make really amazing artwork that is super depth and be very loose at the same time. So, look up how to render a sphere, look up how to render a cube, right? And just even doing artwork like this, which I think this is AI, but I'm sorry I put this in here, but do it by hand, post it in the group, and I look forward to seeing it. Amazing, guys. This was great. Love y'all. Peace, power. Make beautiful art. I'll see you in school. Have a great weekend. Bye.